Good evening. I'm Diana Sky, and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is in Canada, meeting Prime Minister Marc Carney before heading to Florida on Sunday for talks with Donald Trump on the next steps in the stalled Ukraine peace plan. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, tonight's headlines. Russian drones and missiles pound Ukraine's capital. And Belarus may be hosting nuclear-capable hypersonic missiles. Mariah Carey's Christmas classic is challenged on global charts. While Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is in Canada today, meeting the country's Prime Minister Marc Carney ahead of Sunday's crucial talks with President Trump in Florida. Now, the visit comes after Kyiv endured one of the heaviest nights of Russian attacks yet, underscoring what Ukraine says it needs most before any peace deal: secure skies and safety guarantees. Kazimierz Wyszak reports.
The residents of Kyiv had a rough night on Friday. Some 500 Russian drones and 40 missiles struck the Ukrainian capital. The attack lasted until the early morning of Saturday, leaving the city's residents disillusioned about Russia's intentions in the peace process.
They simply pretend they want peace, but in reality, we all know they do not want it.
All of this happening just as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is heading to the United States, where he will meet Donald Trump on Sunday for the latest round of peace talks.
This attack is again Russia's answer on our peace efforts, and it's really shows that Putin doesn't want peace.
I settled 8 wars, and this is the most difficult of them all. But I think we'll get it done. I think we have a good shot at it.
But European leaders don't share the US president's optimism, especially considering Russia's brutal attacks on civilians.
Contrary to President Trump's expectations and despite the readiness to make compromises by President Zelenskyy, Russia attacked again Kyiv's residential districts. I will speak today about the chances for peace with the leaders of Ukraine, Germany, France, the UK, Italy, and the EU.
As Ukraine and the US are fine-tuning the now 20-point peace plan, Kyiv came up with an idea of a nationwide referendum on the peace deal. It would reportedly include points on the potential ceding of territories to Russia under the condition of safety for all voters.
There must be a secure sky and safety across our entire territory, at least during an election or referendum. A referendum is the same process as an election where people everywhere must have the opportunity to come and vote. This includes our military, our civilians, and those abroad.
The ceding of territory has been one of the biggest red lines for Ukraine. Moscow demands that Kyiv gives up the entirety of the occupied regions, including the parts currently under Ukrainian control. President Zelenskyy had previously firmly opposed ceding any land, especially this line of robust fortifications in the Donbas. The referendum proposal is the first time we've seen him consider this type of concession. But as Ukraine's former defense minister told TVP World, the devil lies in the details.
We will see what question would be included in this list for referendum. Because you know that according to Ukrainian constitution, we cannot refuse to our territories. So it's also the serious task for diplomats how to write this question.
As Zelenskyy departed from an airport in Poland, heading to Canada and then Florida, plenty of burning questions are left unanswered when it comes to peace in Ukraine. Questions which ring even louder in the relative quiet of the Kyiv metro's bomb shelters. For TVP World, Kazimierz Wyszak.
And after more on the story, we go live straight to Kyiv. Our correspondent Oz Katerji joins us. Oz, good evening. Well, we just heard our other reporter tell us, another plenty of burning questions unanswered. Another devastating blow to Kyiv carried out by Russian missiles. Oz, what more details can you give us about these latest attacks?
Well, yeah, it started in the early hours of the morning, lasted for about 10 hours, this air raid. Russia launching more than 500 drones and 14 missiles at Ukraine, largely targeting the capital of Kyiv. Now, air raids continued out throughout the day. 2 people have been killed, 32 others wounded, 2 children among the wounded. One of the dead, an elderly man. His wife is reportedly in critical condition in hospital. So again, another difficult day. Critically, Russia once again targeted energy infrastructure here, knocking out or damaging a power plant which deals with both heat and power. So at least a third of the city was left without heat. And large parts of the city, which are already experiencing rolling blackouts, had to deal with much further delays to their energy. Even right here in the city centre, the tree and the church might be lit up, but there are large parts that are just completely without power at the moment. So again, another difficult day for the Ukrainian people dealing with this. And this is the same all across the country. In fact, it's much worse in other parts of the country, more rural areas that are really struggling to heat their homes, to have power at all, because Russia keeps targeting the energy infrastructure. So while there may be peace talks, so-called peace talks, and there may be discussions regarding this, the government here in Kyiv and also their allies, we heard from Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk there, that insist that Russia is showing how it feels about these peace talks by continually bombarding Ukrainian civil infrastructure, and the capital of Kyiv once again being targeted in this large-scale bombardment.
Absolutely devastating. Oz Chatterjee, thank you so much for your report coming to us live from Kyiv. Please do stay safe. Now, Russia isn't only meddling in Ukraine. There are growing concerns that it has placed nuclear-capable hypersonic missiles in neighboring Belarus. And U.S. intelligence suggests the weapons may be deployed at a former airbase in eastern Belarus, a move Minsk calls defensive, but one that's raising alarm across Europe. Our defense correspondent Zuzana Jurek has the story.
Does Belarus house the Russian nuclear-capable hypersonic ballistic Oreshnik missile? It appears so, according to U.S. experts whose conclusions are corroborated by American intelligence. According to the researchers' analysis of satellite imagery as cited by Reuters press agency, the missile, which has a range of 5,500 kilometers, is likely deployed at a former airbase in eastern Belarus, near the city of Kyiv. When discussing the deployment on December 17, Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko said the move is part of Minsk and Moscow's proactive defense efforts.
Belarus and Russia are implementing a set of strategic deterrence measures. This includes the deployment of the Russian component of a regional force group on our territory in the event of an escalation of the conflict. Armed forces have been designated several dozen thousand personnel in western Russia, who will immediately join the military struggle as a second echelon.
But as demonstrated by what Moscow continues to insist is a special military operation in Ukraine, Russia will scream about Western aggression while playing offense.
2024, Putin announced mirroring actions when we knew that some strategic new weapons will be passed in Germany. That was the moment then the talk about Oreshnik and Belarus started. That's why it is important to understand that it's not just a bluff, it's a part of strategic game against the West.
But while Moscow paves the way for joint military build-up, Minsk doesn't stay indebted to its big brother.
According to our intelligence, the equipment that is used for strikes against Ukraine and located in Belarus along the border is also mounted on residential buildings. Antennas and other equipment helping to guide Shahed drones toward targets in our western regions are literally put on the roofs of ordinary 5-story apartment blocks. This is an absolute disregard for human life.
But though Minsk continues to faithfully tread behind the Kremlin, exiled opposition activists note that military alignment may not be the ultimate security guarantor for the regime.
Lukashenko's defense minister predicts social upheaval in the country due to the cost of military procurement. He said that without Lukashenko's authorization, on the very same day, 4 new Su-30 SM-2 fighter jets purchased from Russia, costing $50 million each, landed in Belarus. Spending to support the war has already led to a decline in industry and agricultural production.
Każdy z nich kosztuje $50 milionów.
For now, experts note that the newly acquired nuclear warhead is supposed to send a message, not just to the West.
We have two levels on what this topic is working. First is the domestic level to threaten people. This is one, but very significant one.
Equally, though the two dictatorships try to send out a message of strength, it does appear that the threats stop at verbiage alone. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
Kosovars are heading to the polls on Sunday, hoping to break nearly a year of political deadlock. Now, with no government in place and diplomatic relations with Serbia still tense, Michiel van Blommestein reports on how the crucial vote could determine Kosovo's future.
Kosovo's general elections campaign is wrapping up. The country has faced almost a year of political paralysis, with Prime Minister Albin Kurti failing to form a majority government. Hoping to break the deadlock, Kosovar voters head to the polls on Sunday. After the last elections in February of this year, Kurti's left-wing Albanian nationalist self-determination movement lost seats, but remained by far the largest parliamentary group. Kurti failed to form a government with the country's other parties after 9 months of parliamentary wrangling and squabbles. The opposition remains firm in their refusal to co-govern with Kurti.
Kosovo does not deserve to be led by improvisation, by political adventurers, by grudges from a political party that labels others as traitors while laughing and mocking the fate of the citizens.
Analysts think lifting the deadlock will mostly hinge on the result of Kurti's self-determination party.
If he wins again around 42%, then all this deadlock will be repeated again, because the gap between Mr. Kurti and other parties is huge, unbridgeable.
Kosovo is one of Europe's poorest countries and relies heavily on EU aid. And while it is seeking to become an EU member, the process is currently stalled. Since breaking off from Serbia in 2008, Kosovo has failed to be recognized by multiple EU member states, namely Cyprus, Greece, Slovakia, Romania and Spain. And the troubled relationship with Serbia, another European Union membership hopeful, has the EU on the fence.
The official European Union position is they can't force Serbia to recognise Kosovo, partly because you have these 5 members that don't recognise it. But it's understood that there needs to be what we call a normalisation of relations between Serbia and Kosovo.
Prime Minister Kurti's policies toward the Serb minority in northern Kosovo and his combative rhetoric towards Serbia has been met with annoyance from Brussels and Washington.
I know that Serbia has many tanks, but they only waste money keeping them maintained, because with our anti-tank systems they will have nothing useful.
Kurti's policies even led to EU sanctions in 2023, after the Kosovo government installed ethnic Albanians as mayors in majority Serb municipalities that boycotted local elections. Those sanctions were lifted last week. But analysts believe Brussels will be quietly hoping Kurti won't become prime minister after Sunday's elections.
The trouble is, at the moment, and certainly as viewed, from outside, the main stumbling block in recent years has been Albin Kurti as the Kosovo prime minister. If somebody else were to come in, it would be very interesting. Somebody who was more moderate, more willing to engage with Belgrade, and how Belgrade would respond to that.
The question of whether the country's political paralysis will be lifted or will continue into 2026 will be answered when polling stations close on Sunday at 7 p.m. local time. For TVP World, Michiel van Blommestein.
I don't want a lot for Christmas. Does this tune sound familiar? Well, it's been the anthem of the Christmas season for 3 decades. But this year, the Queen of Christmas faced unexpected competition. Is Mariah Carey at risk of being dethroned? Well, to find out, watch this next report by Sonia Agata Biszczan.
Make my wish come true.
It's difficult to imagine Christmas without Mariah Carey. For 3 decades, All I Want for Christmas has ruled the holiday charts. But now Spotify suggests there's a new fan favorite.
Don't cry, snowman.
Earlier in December, Sia Snowman took the lead among the most listened to Christmas songs in the world in 2025, according to Spotify's press release sent to RTL France. But not all is lost for Carey, as her holiday classics still topped the daily global charts on Christmas Eve with over 23 million streams that day alone. Despite the hit's mega success, Carey, who co-wrote the song with pianist Walter Afanasieff in her mid-20s, was initially very critical of the piece and has only later learned to appreciate it.
You know what, I can live with this and love it and accept it as part of and embrace it as part of my Christmas tradition every year, and my kids do. And it's just like it's become this thing that I'm so thankful for.
And it seems the singer has a lot to be grateful for. Copyright lawyers estimate that the song generates between $2 to $4 million in annual gross revenue and is believed to have generated over $100 million in earnings over the last 3 decades. Experts say the algorithm supports its growth in popularity.
When you click Mariah Carey multiple times, or it's on a dance that you like on TikTok, then ultimately that's going to create even more hits for that individual, that musician.
Dethroned or not, the People's Queen of Christmas is not going anywhere, as her seasonal reign is about to extend to the upcoming Winter Olympics. In February, she will perform at the opening ceremony in Italy. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Agata Biszczan.
But now back to our main story this evening. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is heading to the United States on Sunday to meet President Donald Trump, aiming to finalize a U.S.-brokered 20-point peace plan. This all while Russia continues its shelling of Kyiv and other parts of Ukraine. Now, the talks are set to focus, among other things, on security guarantees, territorial disputes in Donbass, and a 60-day ceasefire to allow for a potential Ukrainian referendum. And I'm joined by Senior Fellow of the Atlantic Council, Diane Francis, to discuss the latest. Diane, I'm so glad to have you here with us on World News Tonight here on TVP World. So now, Diane, Volodymyr Zelenskyy met Marc Carney in Halifax today before he heads to meet Donald Trump in Florida. Now, what can you make of this meeting between Zelenskyy and Marc Carney?
He was there. My understanding is it wasn't because of Carney. It's because of the time zone constraints. And I think they did a conference call with all the European leaders. He went to Canada on his way to Mar-a-Lago, and he did the conference call. And they want to get some of their positions in order before Zelenskyy goes to Mar-a-Lago and talks to Trump.
However, it is important to say that Canada has been quite an avid supporter of Ukraine. Also, let's not forget the amount of the percentage of Ukrainians living in Canada, right? I mean, Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, Toronto, so on and so on. Diane, I want to ask you, I mean, Zelenskyy says he's ready to put a peace deal to a referendum if there is a ceasefire. How realistic is this, though?
Look, I think the whole situation is quite bizarre. First of all, you want to try and stop the shooting and get a peace truce, or even better, get peace, or demilitarized zone, or whatever it's going to look like. But one side isn't negotiating. He's not even saying yes or no to some of the things that are being proposed publicly. Putin hasn't said a thing. He's not at the table. And his seconds in command are, meeting with Trump's seconds in command and so on. But this is a crazy negotiation that's really one-sided. And, I think it's very unfortunate. The other thing that's important, too, to remember is that yesterday marks the anniversary of the day that the Soviet Union dissolved, fell apart. And that is something that Putin calls the worst thing that ever happened in the century. Well, most of us disagree with that. But the point is, this is a very emotional, difficult time. and he's just not doing anything. He's just being passive aggressive. And so it's very difficult to see it going on. He's just sitting there waiting for the best offer before he says anything. And now we have Ukraine talking to all the various allies and to the United States as well, and trying to get something they imagine will appeal to Putin without talking to him, without getting his pushback and his reaction. So, unfortunately, he's controlling this whole situation.
Dan, let me ask you before I move on to something else. I mean, Ukraine, of course, proposing, troop withdrawals in the east, and Russia. I mean, Russia's demanding, this full control of Donbass. And just to go further a little bit into what you're saying, is a demilitarized zone actually truly feasible? And let me just ask you this, my second question right away. I mean, let's forget about Zelenskyy and the government for a moment. How are normal Ukrainian citizens, society, reacting to this if Zelenskyy goes for this?
Look, he has the full support of the people of Ukraine. He's done a terrific job. Not a perfect job, but a terrific job in an awful situation. They do not want to concede any territory. Left to their devices and with unlimited funds from the US and Europe to fight, they would keep fighting. That's sort of my impression. On the other hand, that's not realistic either. And so some of these things that are being thrown out, whether it's about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear reactor, which Russia seems to want to hang on to, possess, even after this is done, or what you do with that piece of Donbass, whether it's a demilitarized zone or whether, as the Americans said, let's turn it into a free enterprise zone. Whatever, that has to be flanked with all kinds of security measures that the Europeans and the Americans are willing to prepare to help Ukraine get through this, and also to give their input as to which solution would work the best. But, all the while sitting there, smugly, passive aggressively as Putin, who's saying nothing.
So, we can't obviously say that Ukrainians are going to react to painful compromises, right? Let me ask you, and now let's forget about them for a moment. Do you actually think that we will be able to achieve a certain peace before the end of the year, which is in just a few days?
I hope so. I'm a little cynical because, as I say, it's all very one-sided. And, there's no way that Putin from yesterday or before was ever going to strike a deal that would be marked by the anniversary of when the Soviet Union fell apart because they capitulated. So, and because in large measure, the first country that left the Soviet Union was Ukraine.
Right.
And so he bears that grudge. And so, I think we've got a situation where hopefully Zelenskyy and Trump will come up with something, Trump that will fully endorse something, and that will make a difference. And then Trump will have to force and demand that Putin responds. And then if not, we've got to have the tomahawks, the pressure, more sanctions. The Europeans have to start to arrest all the shadow boats carrying oil. He's not got pressure on him at this point.
Dan, can a referendum on territory or security guarantees be considered legitimate while these millions of Ukrainians are displaced or fighting or killed under continuous Russian bombardment?
This is a very tricky thing, and it's another, we have an expression in English, throwing the spanner in the works. In other words, throw in something that's going to make the gears all stop working. Putin keeps saying, they have to have an election. Zelensky's not legitimate. They have to have a referendum. Well, he doesn't have elections and he doesn't have referendums. He's a dictator. So the logistics of doing a referendum are possible. Number one, because the Ukrainians are very clever. Number two, because they're digitized. Everybody is online. So they could have a referendum that would include the diaspora, the people living in Poland, the people at the front, the people getting bombed, theoretically. And so if that's going to be necessary, then that's going to be necessary. But it's doable. And I don't know. It depends on what they're voting on, how they'll vote. But I don't think just completely capitulating to everything Putin wants is not going to get the support of the Ukrainian people.
Diane, I mean, we've seen those horrific images of overnight Russian attacks on Kyiv. Honestly, they hurt your stomach when you watch them. But I want to ask you this. I mean, you're talking about Trump, and naturally, he says he can deliver peace quickly, right? I mean, there was an interview that was published on Friday. Trump says that Zelenskyy, quote, doesn't have anything until I approve it. But I mean, let me ask you this. I mean, when Trump sees these videos, sees these images, sees these people dying, I mean, clearly he knows that Russia is the one, sending drones, missiles on these buildings, on this infrastructure, on energy infrastructure. Do you think can any way this actually influence Trump's decision to say, hey, let's side with Zelenskyy for once, because let's be honest, I mean, at least in my opinion, he's been siding with the Russian regime and Putin all along. Do correct me if I'm wrong, Diane.
Morally, that's exactly what he should do, but strategically, what he's decided to do for whatever reason, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Putin has dangled a lot of riches under the nose of the US president for corporations to do business in Russia after this is all over, none of which is believable. But anyway, he's falling for it. He's also taken a position that Ukraine cannot defeat Russia and the United States cannot indefinitely keep supporting, and the Europeans won't keep supporting. So what he's doing, he's got two sides to come to agreement. He can't push the Russians, or he won't push the Russians, and he's pushing the Ukrainians. Totally unfair, absolutely wrong, but possibly the fastest way to get some kind of a deal. I just think, as you point out, I think it's atrocious, it's immoral for Trump not to have given the Ukrainians tomahawks. The Russians are also frightened of Trump. I mean, this is the other card that he has to play that he hasn't played. He wants to be friends. He should be scaring them. So you're saying he has I have to interrupt you. So you're saying, I have to interrupt you. So you're saying that he has leverage also over Moscow, because again, that's not what we've been seeing. If anything, we would think the opposite. He has leverage. And I'll tell you something else that people should keep in mind. He's bombing Venezuela. He's bombing in Nigeria. He's using the full force of American military might to settle little skirmishes here and there. And, the guy is erratic. And when he gets annoyed, he changes his mind. And then suddenly we get a headline like he's blowing up drug boats or he's blowing up terrorists in Nigeria. What is to stop? And if I were Putin, I would calculate what is to stop Trump from suddenly getting angry enough. And I think he's got to put the squeeze on Putin. He's got to make Putin realize he can't be counted on. He is erratic, and he better be careful. And that's part of what the leverage required here is. And I think he can do it. And he's very difficult to read. Now, the good thing is Europe finally gets it. Europe's on side financially. Europe will militarize. So, that's all good. That's in place. But right now, we've got to stop this war. And Trump, and only Trump can do it. And also the Europeans can do it by seizing every boat in their waters carrying Russian oil, keeping it in port, impounding it until they pay a ransom for it.
Diane, I do have 1 minute left for our episode here this evening, but I do want to ask you, with everything you've been saying, what do you think we can speculate or expect? How can we expect the meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy to unfold tomorrow?
Well, we're not going to have, explosive outbursts. I don't think it'll be televised. I think they'll come out united. And he'll have his arm around his back and he'll say, we back you, and so on and so forth. And there'll be some kind of watered down, proposition for Putin to consider. And then Putin's guys will say, okay, well, we'll let our seconds in command talk about it. I'm not going to say anything right now. Keep trying. That's what's going to happen. More foot dragging.
Thank you so much, Diane France. It's always a pleasure to speak to you here on TVP World, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thank you so much for being with us here on World News Tonight.
Anytime.
And thank you for watching this edition of World News Tonight. I'm Diana Skaya, and stay with us for more news and exclusive interviews.